What's up, everyone? Welcome to Wednesday night Mythic Conversations. I'm back here at home after what was a kind of a whirlwind weekend. So if you tuned in last week, you know that I was right here while the rest of the crew was out in San Diego for San Diego Comic-Con. And I was having some major FOMO. I was very much regretting my life decisions and that I was not out there in San Diego. So I booked a plane ticket. I jumped on a plane very early Thursday morning, and I landed in San Diego at 10 a.m. on Thursday. So I missed out on preview night, but I was actually in the venue before lunchtime on Thursday and got to spend the entire rest of the weekend at San Diego. And what an absolutely awesome weekend it was. So tonight on the show, we're going to talk a little bit about San Diego and what happened out there. I'll give you a little bit of a recap from the show. And then we're going to also have story time with Sir Gerard as I read the entire Horror of Einsamall short story. Now, before the show, I saw this comment pop up that says Storytime and Pop and Swap special. Unfortunately, we are not going to be doing a Pop and Swap special tonight, or really for this wave. And it's kind of an unfortunate reality that we just don't have the prototypes. So 2 sets of prototypes were made. One of them is in China right now. We got it over to China right away because we're, trying to expedite these figures and make sure that we can get them completed as quickly as possible. The other set is actually on the way back from San Diego. So we shipped these out to San Diego to display at the show. They are on a pallet somewhere in the United States on the way back to New Jersey. So we don't actually have those prototypes to show. Beyond that, this is definitely a difficult wave for us to pop and swap because so much of the kind of new stuff, specifically the imp scale and the werewolf, they're brand new pieces, like they're brand new 3D printed parts, which makes it very difficult for us to pop and swap that. Now, I know a lot of people have asked to see the werewolf with the armor off and everything. As you know, we do our best to try to show as much of that as possible. This particular wave, just because of the way it worked, going from the prototypes being at Trevor's to photograph, then having to get them all touched up and packed up and get them over to San Diego, just not able to do what we were normally able to do. That being said, I will, as I go through the stories tonight and through everything tonight, try to talk a little bit about some of the pop and swaps with these and, answer some of the questions that I know people have had for that. So I'm going to get started. We're going to talk about what's going on. Let me share my screen here. We'll get that going. So obviously, the big thing to talk about is the fact that the pre-order for Mythic Legion's Horror of Einsamall ends this Sunday. Crazy that it has come up this quickly. Smaller wave, smaller pre-order. One of the things I've said previously to kind of expect from us going forward is you're going to see a lot of our waves that are a little bit smaller. You're going to see a lot of offerings like we just saw with Infinite Legions that are only like 2 figures. We're going to do a lot more stuff like that more frequently. With all the brands we're trying to support now, namely Mythic Legions, Cosmic Legions, Figure Obscura, Infinite Legions, and Graveyard, that's 5 different brands that we have under our kind of umbrella right now, it's hard to manage all of those when we've got really long pre-orders because we have really large waves. So we're definitely trying to manage that a little bit. So this was just about a month for this pre-order, and that's ending this Sunday. So this is the Store Horseman pre-order. Obviously, these will be available through our retailer partners after the fact. So starting on Monday, you will be able to get these from our retailer partners. They'll be the regular prices. So as opposed to the discounted pre-order prices, which are about 25% cheaper for a standard, for like one of the individual figures, versus it's a 30% savings on the all-in. It's actually just over 30. You'll pay the regular prices. Similarly, if you wait and buy these from us at a show, quantities will be limited and they will be at those normal retail prices. So be aware of that. Keep that in mind. Now, looking at this picture right here, just answer a few questions that people have had. And I'll start clockwise from Garmer, the werewolf, the actual horror of Einsamall. That is a brand new figure. That figure, it uses a lot of the body parts from the Leodicius sculpture that we debuted in the Reign of the Beasts line. Eric did resculpt the lower legs because he wanted to get those double knees in there. So it's got single jointed elbows, but it's got the butterflies. It's got the bicep swivels. It does have double knees to help you hit some of those kind of poses. In terms of popping and swapping, at this point, you're not going to have a lot of popping and swapping you can really do with it because it's a fully furry body. So unlike, the other ogre scales we have that aren't furry, you'd want to do something on this. I mean, it's going to be great base for customs, but there's really not a lot of heads that we have that already have that fur. So realistically, Leodicius will be the first that has the furry body. Garmer will be the second. That's not to say we won't have more in the future. Now going over to Jaco Ironbones, he is a 1.0 figure. So that Tundra Orc, it's not, a lot of people thought at first it was brute scale or even bigger. It is 1.0 scale. It looks really big because of the big shoulder pads and the big, helmet attachments and stuff, but it is a 1.0 figure. From the waist up, it uses the new 3.0 body. So 3.0 is just our kind of way of talking about us adding some of this articulation innovation into it. A lot of those parts are going to be swappable with 1.0. Some pieces won't, just because, it's got double jointed elbows. So you won't be able to swap the elbows the same way you would swap with existing 1.0 figures, but the arms will be able to swap. So there is going to be definitely some compatibility between 1.0 and kind of what we're calling 3.0, because this figure does have butterflies, biceps, double jointed elbows, single jointed knees, because that's what worked for this particular figure. I posted a picture yesterday of kind of the Frost gang going on. For a while, Eric was really excited about doing that group of green characters, starting with the orcs and then goblins, ogres, and trolls. All that group looked really cool together. And we've done a lot under that banner. We got to the Frost group a lot quicker. So we already had the Ice Troll, which came out quite some time ago, originally in the Soul Spiller wave. Then we got the Frost Ogre that was in the Ashes of Agbendor wave. And in this particular wave, we've got not only this Tundra Orc, but we've also got that alternate head that comes with Burger Story to do the Frost Goblin. That's cool. That's cool. Brendan says, I saw a video today where Lenny from Hasbro says he backed the dragon because it's so friggin' cool. That's awesome. Next is the bear, Ishborn. The only thing he's going to be swappable with is the other bear, Bodvar. The mounts are not super swappable. Again, custom parts can certainly be added to them, but the figure is fully articulated. It does stand up on its hind legs. The harness and everything is fully removable. That brings us to Burgess Story, which is really one of the biggest new things, these imp scale figures, right? So imp scale, there's a lot of question marks because they don't exist yet. We still have to have them fully tooled and all of the engineering, but our goal is that a number of the pieces will be compatible with 2.0. The heads will certainly be compatible with 2.0 because both Byler Frostfur and Burgess Story come with 2.0 heads. Burris comes with the thump head. Byler comes with the Thistlethorn head. So absolutely, that is going to be possible. The pauldrons should work in 2.0 bodies as well. The arms at the shoulders should work. The legs are going to be a little bit different. And the main reason is if you've got a 1.0 figure, right, the torso goes into the pelvis with kind of that ball piece. Whereas on 2.0 figures, it's more of a peg. Right? They're just a different construction. These imp scale figures have a ball, but it's not the size of the 1.0 one because the figure is so much smaller. So the torso and the pelvis piece together are not compatible with like 2.0. You can't put a 2.0 torso on these little legs. But what we're hoping is that you might be able to remove the legs at the pelvis and plug those into a 2.0 pelvis if you want to mix and match that way. Those are our goals. Again, the goal here, compatibility is always something we focus on, but we've got to make sure the figure itself is the best that it can be. So the figure itself, making sure it is solid, the new scale works within each other, that absolutely is the most important, whereas compatibility with previously released kinds of figures is a little more secondary. Now, obviously, Burris and Byler will be totally swappable with each other. Can we just swap the ball peg? Well, no, it's part of the pelvis. So you might be able to swap the pelvis, but then you'll also have to swap the torso as well. Like those two pieces go together the same way that you can't use a 1.0 torso on a 2.0 like pelvis. Think about it that way. This particular setup is different because of the size of the figures themselves. But again, as I was saying, Byler and Burris will be totally swappable with each other. Igraine, Commander Igraine, she's a 2.0 figure, so all of that is completely swappable with existing 2.0 figures. Already talked about Byler. I mean, some people have also asked about the feet. The feet should work with 2.0. That's the plan. And lastly, we've got Halvard of Frothfar. He is a 1.0 figure. The one thing I don't know yet is the ponytail that hangs down, the braid that hangs down in back. I don't know how that's going to be attached, if it's going to be articulated. It's probably just going to plug in and be something that you can move, but I don't believe it's meant to have any kind of, it doesn't have like a ball joint or something where you could like position it way up. I don't know why you would, but that's the plan for that as of right now. And that should answer most of the questions about the compatibility. Unfortunately, as I said, I don't have pops and swaps that I can show you, but at least hopefully that answers some of your questions about the compatibility of these figures. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about San Diego Comic-Con. So this was my first time ever out at San Diego for San Diego. It was my first time in San Diego. It was my first time at San Diego Comic-Con. First off, San Diego is gorgeous. Like, I stepped out of the airport and it's California, so I'm expecting it to be hot. I'm expecting it to be really, really muggy. San Diego was mild, no humidity. It is absolutely gorgeous environment there. And the thing that blew me away, and I've heard people say about this about Comic-Con, is there's nothing like it. Like, you have to go and experience it to understand it. And it's totally true because it takes over like all of downtown San Diego. Like, it is all Comic-Con. Absolutely incredible. I had a great time. I mentioned on the afternoon show today, it was way more action figure and toy heavy than I expected it to be. That was absolutely incredible. Like, the fact that there were such incredible displays from all these other toy companies, super, super cool. I got to meet a lot of new friends. I got to hang out and talk to a lot of people that I just love seeing. So I can't say enough about it. And part of what was so cool was our booth kicked ass. Like our booth was very, very cool. This is a display of the booth. So it was 20 feet wide by 10 feet deep. The big thing we were there promoting was Mythic Legions, the role-playing game, which of course we talked in depth about on this show last week. So because of that, we really only brought Mythic Legions with us just because we knew this would be a new audience and we didn't want to confuse them with too many product offerings. We did have some Cosmic in the display case, which we'll look at in just a moment, but the offerings for sale were just Mythic. And essentially it was the Necronominus wave along with some Ninian infantries, the touring figure of this year, which is the legendary Barbarian, and the SDCC debut Heroic Paladin / Cleric from Mythic Legions, the role-playing game. Everything sold out. We allocated Barbarians and Paladins for each day. So we had a certain amount for each day of the show. They sold out every single day of the show within about 45 minutes. By Sunday morning, early Sunday morning, every single thing we had brought, minus a few pins, had been sold. And by the end of the day, the final SDC exclusive little RPG pin that had sold, meaning it was a true and complete sellout for us at San Diego, which everyone who came by the booth, thank you very much. So this is what we had here. We had all the way to the left, Mythic Legions, the role-playing game. We had that little setup there. We had brought the giant ogre Kurzog, which was great. The amount of people that were taking photos with Kurzog was incredibly impressive. Our table with a bunch of freebies, and then the display case. So in the display case, we had a bunch of different prototypes. These are the only true, like from the studio prototypes. And as I mentioned at the start, we're not doing a pop and swap tonight because we don't have these prototypes in hand. They're on the way back to the studio somewhere. So these were all on display at the show to let people, kind of see in person what was being available on the website. It's the only time these have been shown publicly outside of the studio. So this was the first true pre-order. This was, I should say, the only true pre-order that we had there, the only true prototypes, because everything else we had were actually factory production samples, which is super cool. The week before this, I was at ChrisCon in Massachusetts, and at ChrisCon, I had some factory production samples of Ox Crew 1, Ashes of Agbendor, and the Legions Con Crossrow figures. We brought some of those here with us, but we also brought Rising Suns. So as you can see on the little banners there, as of right now, our expectation is that Rising Suns will be arriving to us in Q4 of this year. Will they be at Legions Con? Probably not. Legions Con is early November. Remember, we have to fill all orders, all pre-orders on Store Horseman, and we have to have retailer street date pass before we bring things to shows. My gut tells me that we're going to be probably during the shipping process when Legions Con shows up. So these will probably not make it to the show, but trust me, don't worry. There's plenty of other stuff for you to buy at Legions Con. Trust me. But very cool to see these in person. That was nice to have them out there. We also had, as I mentioned, the Ox Crew figures. So Ox Crew Wave 1, which is completed. It's on the way. It might even be on the water now. At the very least, it's on the way from the factory over to the port in China to be put on a container and sent over to us. Our expectations is that these are going to arrive to us in September, and Store Horseman pre-orders will begin shipping. These should be at Legions Con. Ox Crew 2, that was on display as well. Now, I didn't have Ox Crew 2 on display at ChrisCon the other week. These were on display at San Diego Comic-Con. These are in the pre-production process now. These will be starting production in the coming months. These are expected to be shipping to us before the end of the year. Looking at the current schedule, we'll probably be shipping these to customers before the end of this year. So that's very exciting as well. Ashes of Agbendor, that was available to show at ChrisCon last week. Very, very cool. This says arriving 2026. We're still waiting to see when these are actually going to ship. They might arrive right near the end of 2025 or right at the beginning of 2026. That's what we're looking at right now. These were on display except for Yosef of the Golden Spear. I did see that Joe Russo, when he saw the photos from Comic-Con, was kind of bummed that Yosef wasn't on display. Complete oversight. We found it in the case after the show, so it just didn't go out. It kind of weaseled his way into the bottom of the case and didn't make its way out. We had a display of some items that are available on Store Horseman. There's a number of things available on Store Horseman that are in stock and shipping, right now. We didn't want to duplicate efforts and bring all that stuff to the show as well, since everything we brought, doing the West Coast shows, it's awesome. People loved having us out there. We loved being there, but it's very different than when we load up the truck and drive it to a more local show. Even a show like Toylanta, that's far, but we drove to, we can bring more inventory in a more variety of inventory because it's going in the truck. When you have to ship it out there and potentially ship it back if it doesn't sell, you've got to be a little more selective and a little more conservative. So we didn't bring all this stuff, but we did want to show it. Finally, we had the Necronominous Wave, which was what we were selling there. So those were all on display. Of course, we also had the 2025 touring exclusive figure, which is Legendary Barbarian. Now, I will answer this question because I answered it a lot this weekend. The plans for the Legendary Barbarian, which is what we have said since the beginning of the year, we are bringing these to every single live event we do this year. Bigger events get more stock, smaller events get less stock. The idea is towards the end of the year, these will be available at storehorseman.com. They will not be a pre-order. They will be in-stock items. They are literally the same exact figures that we are bringing to the live shows. There will be purchase limits, just like there are purchase limits at the live event. So if you can't get out to a live event, one of the reasons we did this is to give people that go to the live event something exciting to be able to purchase, something exclusive to be able to purchase. But if you know Four Horsemen Studios, we don't do really true, like you can only get it at the show exclusives. We want to make it available, or at least a version of it available elsewhere. In this case, the exact same figure. When they came in, we took the run, we split it in half. Half is available for the online sale. The other half we allocated accordingly throughout the year's shows. So if you haven't picked up the Legendary Barbarian yet, patience. You will have a chance to get it online at Store Horseman at the end of the year. This will not be a figure available through retailer partners, but it will be on Store Horseman as an in-stock item. Of course, the big figure of the weekend was the SDCC exclusive debut figure, the Heroic Paladin Cleric. Now, people were losing their minds for this thing, right? I see this thing on eBay for $200, and it is an awesome, awesome figure. What I will tell you is what I have told people multiple times. This was your first chance to get this figure. It was not your only chance. Now, please listen to me. In the Kickstarter that we are going to do in February for Mythic Legions, the role-playing game, the exact same figure that we had at San Diego will be available. The ones we had at San Diego, we air shipped from China early so we could have them at San Diego Comic-Con. We do not have the rest of the inventory. It is still in China at this point. Those will eventually make their way to us, and this will be one of the pledge items that's going to be in the Kickstarter. Not a different one, the exact same one. Same packaging, comes with the dice, comes with the 2 cards that are in it. It's in the black and gold San Diego colors that we did to be at San Diego. Exact same one. We will also have alternate versions. So the one that you see here that's exactly like San Diego, it is going to be an in-stock limited item because we made a certain number of them to be available either at San Diego or in the Kickstarter. There will also be alternate versions of these characters, different colors, offered like split up a little bit differently. Again, I can only say so much right now, that will be available as kind of pre-order type, unlimited quantities based on how many are pre-ordered in the Kickstarter. So understand that is you will have a shot at this. You will have a shot at alternate versions of this. So I offer that. If you want to go on eBay and pay $200 for it now, totally your call. That is up to you. We are doing what we can to make it available down the road as well. So that was kind of the recap of San Diego. Again, I had an absolute blast. We will absolutely be back next year. This is our first time at San Diego the first time that we'd been at San Diego in 8 years. And if you think about Four Horsemen Studios 8 years ago, it was a very, very different company, right? I mean, I think Advent of Decay hadn't even shipped yet at that point. The first wave might have just shipped. It was, again, very different time. And at that point, the company it's expensive to get out there. Between flights and hotel rooms and food and bringing the inventory, it wasn't easy, and the company wasn't big enough. They weren't doing enough sales to justify that expense. Beyond all that, it's also grueling. Monday I flew back from San Diego. I left my hotel at like 8:00 in the morning, West Coast time. I didn't walk in here until 12:30 at night. I walked into my house. It's an entire day of travel. So it's grueling. And at the time, it just didn't make sense. For the last few years, we kind of looked at at San Diego and we've said, should we go back? Is it time for us to go back? And this year was the one that we finally said, you know what? Let's give it a shot. Let's see what the reception would be. And it blew us away. And we went big. We didn't say, let's just go out there with a couple table skirts and some, a few cases of inventory and see. We brought all the prototypes. We crated up the ogre. That was 2 giant crates that Joe built to bring that ogre. So we kind of put our best foot forward, and I'm so happy we did because the response out there was unbelievable. We were on cloud 9 the entire weekend with everybody. So once again, thank you to everyone that came by the booth. We will absolutely see you back in San Diego next year. Probably my favorite photo from San Diego is this one. So if you've seen any coverage of SDCC, you saw this guy walking around in this giant Galactus suit. Like it was huge Galactus suit, right? All lit up and everything. So he was walking around multiple days, and he walks right by, like, our booth was on one side of the aisle. Mezco was right across from us, which was awesome because good friends with Mezco. Seeing D and all those guys was super cool. Galactus walks by, and we start to try to take a picture, and he looks down at us, and he says, because he could talk, right? And he said, do you guys want to take a picture? So we're like, yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, George had just walked away from the booth, but you can see all 5 of us that were at the booth took a picture with this guy in this Galactus costume. And then he looks down at us and he says, I love your guys' work. Your stuff is some of my favorite pieces in my collection. So the fact that this was genuinely a fan and he came by the booth and did this for us, in part because he's a fan, was such a cool feeling. Like after he walked away, we were all buzzing because it felt cool. Anyway, that's enough about San Diego. I had an absolute blast. Thank you again for everyone that came out. With that, I'm going to turn to reading this incredibly, incredibly long story. I don't know how long this is going to take. So if you were following last week, when we launched the Horror of Einsamall wave, through the presentation, through the reveal special, we kind of talked about the story. And we had a lot of feedback from people who were like, hey, I loved the really narrative, story-driven way that you presented these characters. They all had a role. They all made sense within this story. And we loved hearing that. But the whole time we knew we had the full short story to share as well. So what we did was we broke that short story up into 7 different parts, and we posted them one per day all of last week. Every different chapter or installment focuses on a different character. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read that right now. Now, if questions come in, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to see them because I'm going to get through this. So if you have questions, especially questions about SDCC or something, let's save those for the end because I'm just not going to get to them during this part of the presentation. So part 1, and by the way, you can follow all of these if you go online to sourcehorseman.com/Einsamall. You can actually read all these stories. They're in the blog section, but if you go to /Einsamall, it actually has all of the actual Einsamall stories in order. Part 1, Igraine. Igraine of Etheros, your presence has been requested by the 5 seats. Igraine rose as she heard the knocking through her chamber. Opening the door, she saw a pair of tower guards waiting for her. "Please, come with us," the first guard said as he motioned Igraine out of the room she had been given during her stay at the Castle of Four Sides. She had been there for almost a year now, acting as a representative from the Kingdom of Etheros. It was a role she was still trying to become comfortable with, accepting that her place was now in a room filled with conversations and compromises rather than on the field of battle. It was a far cry from how she had served the realm during the Second Great War. She was only a young conscript in the Order of Etheron's army back then, but she fought well and bravely, and she was one of the soldiers who survived those horrible times. In the aftermath of that war, the realm slowly began to rebuild itself, and the Legions of Light pledged to begin a new age of cooperation and friendship. Igraine was named a Knight of Etheros. It was her life's dream and her greatest honor to serve her kingdom, and she imagined that she would be asked to use her skills in combat to continue to defend the realm from those who would seek to do harm. That, it seemed, was not her path. Her sword had not left its scabbard in many years, other than for the occasional training session, and she found that she was now more of a politician than a soldier. "What do the seats want?" Igraine asked. "We do not know," the first guard replied. "Rumor is that some kind of urgent message has just arrived from the far north. It was carried by a trader who said they were given it a week ago in Alcarium." "Far north? But Shelgard and Vikenfell have not yet been resettled," Igraine questioned. "Further north even than that," the second guard answered. "They say that the message came from Einsamall." The remote settlement of Einsamall was a place that many in Mythos didn't even believe existed. Founded by pilgrims who left the newly formed kingdoms of the Legions of Light after the events of the First Great War, the people of the far north had long since removed themselves from the doings of the rest of the realm. Einsamall had not fought in the Second Great War, nor had they been a part of the rebuilding process after those battles. For all practical purposes, Einsamall was not a part of Mythos in any real way, which made correspondence from that settlement a truly unusual and unexpected occurrence. The remainder of the walk to the audience chamber was made in silence as Igraine wondered why she would have been summoned. She would know soon enough, but something in her felt, or at very least hoped, that this summons meant that she was needed beyond the walls of this castle. In the aftermath of the Second Great War, the Castle of Four Sides had once again become not only the geographic center of Mythos, but also the political capital. Originally built to be a gathering place for the Legions of Light in the early days of the realm, the castle eventually became more of a ceremonial site rather than political or military location. In more recent times, it had not even served a ceremonial function and had gone largely unused for many years as the kingdoms of Mythos became increasingly insulated in the days before the return of the Dark Four. That had now changed. As the realm worked to rebuild after the end of the Second Great War of Mythos, the Castle of Four Sides shined as both a symbol of the Legions of Light's cooperation and the true seat of power in Mythos. The vast audience chamber in the center of the castle was once again populated by representatives from Etheros, Leandor, Xylernia, and Ophidian. But these four kingdoms that had long made up the Legions of Light were no longer alone in their stewardship of the realm. While the exterior of the massive castle still featured four distinct sides, one for each of the great beasts whose armies formed the Legions of Light, a fifth seat and corresponding gallery had been added to its audience chamber. The Legions of Light had been accused of turning a blind eye to any who did not swear allegiance to one of their four kingdoms, and so this fifth seat was open to any in Mythos who wished to have their voice heard. That seat held as much power and influence as the others, evidence that the kingdoms of Mythos had learned a lesson during the Second Great War and were committed to building a better world for all the denizens of the realm, regardless of where they lived or what banner they flew. With the addition of this gallery, the council that met at the castle to discuss important matters was renamed the Five Seats. One of the ironies of the creation of the fifth seat was that the representatives who most often occupied that spot were from the House of the Noble Bear. Hailing from the codes of Bjorngar, this faction of barbarians and outcasts were well known for their general disdain for authority and for the faction system itself. Led in the Second Great War by the one-time Prince of Leandor, the barbarian king known as Atlas the Conqueror, their battle prowess was one of the factors that tipped the scales in favor of the Legions of Light in that war. After the fighting was over, the House of the Noble Bear insisted that the faction system itself was flawed and that it had failed too many in Mythos, leading to many of the problems that had allowed the Dark Four to rise again. The Legions of Light agreed, and in response decided to not only once again cooperate with each other, but with all people and all races who sought to live a good life in Mythos. And then they asked the House of the Noble Bear to be part of that change and participate in the politics of the newly formed Five Seats. Reluctantly, the House of the Noble Bear agreed, and while the fifth seat and its corresponding gallery at the Castle of Four Sides were indeed open to all, the barbarians of Bjorngar were the ones who could most commonly be found there speaking for the disaffected and factionless members of the realm. Igraine made her way into the cavernous room. While she would never be comfortable as a politician, she had to admit that the space was impressive, and as were the accomplishments that she had seen in that chamber since she had arrived at the castle. There was no doubt that they were making the realm better, and she told herself that whenever she felt out of place in the Castle of Four Sides. The name Five Seats was a bit misleading for those who did not understand the workings of the great audience chamber. There were indeed 5 chairs arranged around a table in the center of the room, but the members who sat in those chairs were not permanent, nor did they have absolute say for their faction. Behind each of these seats, there stretched a gallery of benches where other members of each faction sat during the official proceedings. Any votes would be cast only after the representatives sitting in the floor seat consulted with their gallery, and it was not uncommon for the delegate chosen to sit on the floor to change from day to day. Igraine had even found herself seated on the floor a few times during the past year, a far too visible position that she certainly did not relish and was always eager to relinquish to another delegate from Etheros. Igraine, I am happy you are here, called a voice to the young knight's left. She turned to see General Delphina of Etheros, one of the heroes of the Second Great War. Igraine had been inspired to join the Order of Etheron's army after seeing Delphina rise through the ranks of the Templars. While Igraine was not a Templar herself, she had served under Delphina and the other Templar knights during the attack of Vikenfell, and she had long idolized her. Delphina was not normally stationed at the Castle of Four Sides, so to see her here now was a surprise. General Delphina, Igraine said with a reverential bow, I am at your command. Please rise, Igraine. We have no time for formalities, Delphina replied. There is much to discuss. Come, we need to begin immediately. Igraine looked around and was surprised to see that the audience chamber was largely empty. Only 4 others were in that chamber with Igraine and Delphina, and the young knight gasped when she saw who they were, all revered heroes of the Second Great War. From the convocation of Basilia was the mysterious as a spirit bender. One of the oldest living beings in mythos, Azza was once a member of Poxus's forces. This powerful necromancer broke free from the evil influence of the Lord of Disease and joined the side of good. She was instrumental in saving her faction from the assault of the Circle of Poxus during the burning of Ophidian. Calling upon the spirits of the scholars that had once walked the halls of Basilia's schools, she chased Poxus's forces away and allowed her faction the time it needed to regroup from the devastating attack. The fact that any members of the convocation were even alive to fight during the final battles of the Second Great War was thanks in large part to Azza Spiritbender. Beside her sat the Jagualian thief from Zylona's flock named Hypatia. He was responsible for breaking into the bloodless throne and rescuing the imprisoned Queen Artemis Silvercord. The leader of the flock would also not have been around to fight in the final battles of the Second Great War had the Jagualian not braved the cold expanse of the White Spine and the threat of the Frost Ogres that guarded the vampire's black fortress to save the Fey Queen. From the army of Laodicea stood the mighty Magnus, a decorated warrior with an almost folk hero level of reverence around his deeds and military prowess even before the battles of the Second Great War. Magnus led a regiment of soldiers that held the door of this very castle secure against an overwhelming assault from the massive ogre Kurzog and the rest of the Legion of Erether's forces. Finally, there sat a warrior who Igraine was used to seeing in the audience chamber of the Castle of Four Sides. Halvard of Frothvar did not have the same kind of heroic legacy that the others in the room had tied to their names, but he had fought alongside Atlas the Conqueror and his House of the Noble Bear during the Second Great War. Since that time, he had been assigned as an envoy from Bjorngard to the castle, and Igraine often saw him sitting in the fifth seat, which is where he sat now. "Is the chamber in session?" Igraine asked. Everyone in the room was looking at her, and she blurted out the question to break the awkward silence. "No," Delphina said. "This is not a matter for the chamber as a whole. This is something we wish to handle more quietly." "Is it about the letter from Einsamall?" Igraine questioned. Hypatia laughed. He leaned back in his chair with his feet up on the chamber table as he deftly balanced a dagger on his outstretched fingers. The thief flipped the blade over and over in his hands, expertly finding its balance with each flip of the dagger. "No chance of keeping something a secret in this place, is there?" he said. "And you wonder why I don't spend more time at the castle. For someone who trades in discretion like me, this place is bad news." "And yet you are here now," Magnus replied coolly. "Lucky for us." Hypatia shrugged and removed his feet from the table. "The flock wanted to make sure this was done right and quietly. Can't trust the mighty Magnus to do things subtly and quietly, can we? That's not Magnus's style. From what I hear, she wishes to know why she has been called," as a spirit bender interrupted the Jagualian. Her eyes were hidden by the shadows beneath her hood, and she leaned on a staff that she clutched in her hands before her. "Time is fleeting. We must get on with why Igraine of Etheros has been summoned this night." Delphina handed Igraine a small folded piece of paper. "This is about the letter from the north," she said. "Here, please read it to yourself. We have all already done so." Igraine unfolded the letter and began to read. "Hello and warm greetings. I do wish this letter found its way into your hands in merrier times. I am writing from the far northern settlement of Einsamall. I expect you are surprised to hear from us, and there is no need to be dishonest about our place in mythos. It is true that the people of Einsamall have long cared little for the doings of the greater realm and have been content to keep to ourselves, but I write today with an urgent plea. We need help. For the past 2 fortnights, as of this writing, we have been attacked by something that comes for us every few nights. Something has made off with a villager on 4 instances now. We have found their bodies torn to shreds upon the ice the next morning. After the first, we expected it was someone who had gotten lost on the tundra and fell victim to one of the predators of the far north. Then a second went missing, then a third. We sent our hunters out to find the beast responsible, but nothing has been found. Then, last night, it came again. But this time we heard the screams as it dragged away the watcher we had stationed at the gates. We found his body this morning. Once again, it was torn apart and ravaged. We are at a loss. Some here do not wish to contact you for help. some of the old ones whose families have lived isolated here in Einsamall for an age, but I was not born here on the ice. I have seen much, and I know when something is beyond our ability to handle alone. Damn the old ones who think they can continue to keep to ourselves. We will not survive long without some help. Please send your warriors north. I have little I can offer by way of thanks other than a warm bed and a cold mug of ale at my inn. But I hope that the goodness that was once professed by the legions of light to protect the people of this realm will hold true for us all the way up here in the colds of Einsamall. I do not know when this letter shall arrive to you or if it will arrive at all, but we are desperate. Please come. Einsamall needs you. Sincerely, Burris Burgerstory, Mayor of Einsamall. Oops. Igraine looked up from the letter, but before she could talk, Delphina began to speak. We are sending a party north to help them out, she explained. There is no time to debate and deliberate the best course of action with the full chamber. Time is clearly important here, so we are assembling a team to leave immediately. But there is also more to the story than simply helping our neighbors, as added. We have detected some kind of magical anomaly in the far north. The convocation was planning to investigate it when I was summoned here about this letter. We do not know if the two are connected, but it would seem too coincidental not to be. Either way, it must be looked into. Hence the discretion, Carpaccia chimed in. Until we know what is happening up there in the Northlands, we want to keep this to a small circle who need to know. Congratulations. You get to be part of that circle. Yay, team. Igraine turned to Delphina. We would ask you to lead this mission, Igraine. We have assembled a small party with each of the factions represented. All of them have been briefed on what is expected, but they need a leader. I expect you are ready to get out of these chambers and back to some real action. Am I correct? Igraine nodded and tried not to smile. She did not succeed. I would be too, Delphina smiled back. We are fortunate to be in a time of peace where deliberation and discussion are the tools of the day. But for ones like you and I, for whom the sword and the shield are our tools, these walls can feel like an enemy too insurmountable to be defeated. I wish to serve any way I can, Igraine replied. I accept this mission. Magnus walked towards Igraine, placed a hand on her shoulder. We thank you, he said. Delphina has said you can be trusted and will not shy away from whatever dangers you find up north. That is good, and it is why you have been chosen to be a leader. It is a burden not all can handle, but something tells me that Delphina is right and that you are ready for this task. All the heroes in the chamber stood up and nodded to Igraine. We thank you for your commitment and your service, Delphina said. Good luck, Commander Igraine. So that was part one, which made me realize that it's going to take me a while to get through all these chapters tonight. So buckle up. Hope you're in for the long haul here. We revealed Halvard first during the pre-order, but we started with the Igraine story. And it's really was that last line for me. The fact that that last line where she's addressed as Commander Igraine and you see her take on that leadership role, I loved it. Like that was the first one I wrote and it felt like a great way to kick this off. You know, we didn't want to show the lone female from the wave as the first reveal, which is why we started with Halvard and Elise did her second. But those were the two that I flipped specifically for this chapter. A lot of stuff in that chapter that I think is really cool. We learn, quite a bit about what the realm is like in the aftermath of the Second Great War. There's actually quite a bit of like world building and kind of political stuff that we talk about in there. And of course, we do get to see some other characters, including Delphina of Etheros, who's now been elevated to the role of general. We get to see both Azza and Carpaccia, two characters that I intentionally put in there because they're part of the Ashes of Agbendor wave that's going to be coming soon. So I really wanted both of them. Azza is one of my favorite figures, and I really like that character. So I was excited to put her in. And Carpaccia is a character that I created. So I was really excited to have him. And I loved, probably my favorite line is when he says, "Yay, team." Like just that kind of flippant, he's sitting there with his feet up on the table and he's flipping and catching a dagger. And he's just got this like cocksure kind of arrogance about him. which I really kind of enjoy because he's someone who, I mean, he's a hero, right? He saved Artemis Silvercore. He is a decorated hero of the Second Great War, but he's still kind of that wily thief at heart. So a lot of lore building there, a lot that I really like. Now that brings us to the second chapter, which is Halvard of Hrothgar. I will accompany her north, Halvard of Hrothgar announced. The room turned to look his way, but before any protest could be logged, he continued. My house has had no one picked for this mission, so I choose myself. I know the north better than any of you all, and this lot will be grateful for my help when all goes white and the path is lost and only I can find the way forward. Have you actually been to Einsamall? Igraine asked. Nay, Halvard replied. But I've been much closer than any of the others on your team here. A good group you've got behind you, but southern blood in them, each and every one. Not a true northerner to be found. I shall see you to Einsamall, this I promise. Delphina of Etheros looked at the other members of the legions alike gathered at their secret meeting. Do any gathered here object to Halvard of Hrothgar joining this mission? We do not object, responded Asa Spiritbender, Kaipacha, and Magnus in unison. Delphina turned back to Halvard. Get your things, she said. The party leaves immediately. Halvard rose from the table and smiled. Already packed, he said. We of Bjorngar are always ready to travel. You never know when adventure will come calling. The adventure party left for the Castle of Four Sides in secrecy under the cover of night. Igraine led the way with Halvard taking up the rear. The remainder of the party was comprised of a paladin from the army of Leodicius, a mage from the convocation of Basilia, and a ranger sent by Xylone's flock. Igraine had been briefed on each of their skills and why they had been selected for this mission, and while she had never met any of the party before except for Halvard, they were all seasoned soldiers who were ready to serve their kingdoms in the realm. She expected no trouble from any of them. Shortly after the group had left the grounds of the castle, the mage cast a spell to transport them towards the Northlands. They wouldn't be able to use magical means to get all the way to Einsamall, however. The distance was too great, and the cold of the far north had a way of distorting portal magic. Spells that relied on specific locational information were often unpredictable in those frigid climates. Instead, the party was whisked away to Alcarium, on the borders between Leandor and the Northlands. Alcarium had survived the ravages of the Second Great War and had even grown over the years since, becoming the northernmost point of trade and travel in Mythos for all practical purposes. From here, Igraine and the party could gather supplies and make their way further north towards the settlement of Einsamall. It is a miracle that Einsamall still stands, Igraine said to Halvard as they gathered the supplies needed for their journey. The commander had sent other members of their party off on various tasks, so it was only herself and the barbarian from the House of the Noble Bear who were left behind at the outfitters to acquire the supplies. No one of right mind would go that far north unless they had to, Halvard replied, as you shall see soon enough. Tell me, what do you know of Einsamall and the people that live there, Igraine asked. They are called the Unsworn Northfolk, Halvard explained. They are descended from the first people of Mythos who journeyed north in the First Age, after the Dark Four's defeat by the beasts. Halvard and Igraine completed their purchases and thanked the merchant for his help. The rest of the party were still completing their assignment, so the two soldiers continued their conversation as they waited for the others to return. I've only ever met one traveler from Einsamall, Halvard continued. This was many years ago, well before my house marched to fight alongside your faction and the others. He was traveling through Bjorngar on his way back home. Good man, and he told us some tales during the few days he spent at Hrothgar. He said that his people went north after that First Great War. They followed some wizard. I can't remember his name. Last name was something like Dark Spell or Dead Spell, I believe. They followed him to get away from what was happening in the realm after the war was done. They wanted no part of this new making of kingdoms and armies. They simply wanted to be left to live their lives. The House of the Noble Bear understood that, and those of us who heard this man's tale felt a kinship with his people that we had never met. The traveler told of the harsh days of old and of setting the place they would call Einsamall. said that the wizard's magic was the only thing that kept them alive those first few years. But eventually they made their mark and tamed the land to be their home, or at least as much as any could tame the North. Those people have lived here ever since. They keep to themselves and they expect the same from the rest of Mythos. They did not fight in the war, Igraine said, the disdain hard to keep from her voice. Even though the House of the Noble Bear did not agree with the Legions of Light's politics, you still fought with us against the dark. Einsamall did not come to our aid. As is their right, Harvard replied. They went north to escape those fights. Even back then, I expect their wizard saw that the evil powers would rise again. And so he took his people somewhere that he believed would keep them safe. We chose to fight. They did not. That is that. Igraine looked up to see the rest of their party making their way towards them now. We should get going, she said. Halvard nodded. I know not what we go to face, the barbarian said to Igraine. All I know is the people of Einsamall do not ask for help from outsiders, ever. Something must be very wrong in the north for them to have sent that letter. The rest of the party gathered before Igraine could reply. Are we ready then? The Xylernian ranger asked. The sooner we are done with this, the sooner we can all be back at the castle. Igraine nodded. Yes, she answered. Gather the supplies, distribute them evenly. There is still much of the day left. We make for Einsamall immediately. Halvard will lead the way. Halvard hefted a large pack upon his back, arguably taking more of the burden of the supplies than his actual share, but he did not protest as he silently headed towards the long and lonely path that led to Einsamall. So that's the end of part 2. We get a little bit of Halvard in this particular chapter, but we actually get more of him in subsequent chapters. Like, he's a character that I think by the end of the story, you really kind of dig because he's super badass. And I gave him some really fun scenes and some fun lines, but you get a little bit here. Kind of the purpose of this chapter, like the purpose of the first chapter was to set Igraine as the commander, to give you a little bit of that backstory and to set the characters on their way. This chapter was to give you some of that backstory about Einsamall and the unsworn Northfolk. And we get to do that through Halvard. Now, one thing to point out here is there are 3 other members of this party. There is a ranger from Xylernia. There is a mage from the Convocation of Basilia, and there's a paladin from the Army of Leandor, Army of Odysseus. I intentionally didn't name them. There's one point where I refer to the paladin as a he, but I don't actually even tell you what the genders of the other 2 characters are. I did that intentionally, so you can make them whatever you want. Like, if you want to make this little party, you can have any ranger from Xylernia, any paladin from Odysseus, or any mage from Basilia. You can have different races, different, it can be male, female, elf, dwarf, whatever you want. I intentionally left those very open so you could actually, mix and match and do what you wanted for the rest of the party. Because if you've read the whole story, they don't play a really important factor as we go forward. So that idea about not naming them and allowing it to be open-ended, I thought was kind of a fun addition here. That's going to bring us to one of my favorite chapters in this story. This was the one that I was really excited to be able to post because there were a lot of fun little Easter eggs that I threw in this one, as I'm sure you will see. Let me get a quick drink. Hope you're all enjoying tonight's story time. The road north was not an easy one to travel. Igraine did not understand how Halvard was able to navigate in these conditions. Everything was stark white and covered in ice and snow, and yet he never faltered or questioned his steps, nor did he lose sight of the way before them. The others did not complain during the hard trek. Igraine was not sure if this was due to their training and discipline or because it was too cold to muster even the smallest protest. The party trudged ahead in silence as Halvard as Frothvar led the way. The journey to Einsamall comprised the best part of 8 days of hard travel. The party made camp each night, and everyone took turns on watch while the others rested. Igraine couldn't help but notice that even when Halvard was not on watch, he did not seem to sleep. The stout warrior from the House of the Noble Bear always seemed to be alert, always watching for danger. As the group got deeper and deeper into the Northlands, they saw fewer and fewer signs of life. On the second day, they saw evidence of ice trolls, but thankfully the monsters did not make their presence known. The party did encounter a lone frost ogre on their fourth day out. Likely a survivor of the brood's defeated forces, the ogre tried to attack the camp shortly after nightfall. Halvard had sensed that they were being followed in the hours before they stopped to set up camp, and he had the party ready for the assault. The ogre was a formidable foe, but without the element of surprise on his side, the party made short work of it and left the body as a warning to any other predators who thought they could take advantage of these travelers. It was at the start of the 8th day out of Valkyrium when a wooden sign with the word Einsamall crudely carved in it appeared on the road ahead of the party. Before the end of that day, they arrived at the gates of the small community set as far north in Mythos as any had been known to venture. "Are ye lot from the Castle of Four?" a watchman atop the gate called down as Igraine and the party approached. "We are," Igraine replied. "We've been sent by the Legions of Light in the 5 seats. May we enter?" The watchman scrambled down a wooden ladder and unlatched the locks that held the gates closed. Come in, he said as he motioned for the party to enter the gates of Einsamall. Igraine noticed that the locks were old and that the gate would be useless against a force determined to break them down. She expected that this was of little concern to the people of this small settlement, since the remoteness provided the best security they could generally hope for. "We would like to see the mayor of Einsamall," Igraine said to the watchman. "Can you take us to him immediately?" "That is where we are going," the watchman replied as he led the group. "I was told to bring anyone from the legions up to the mayor's place straight away, should they turn up. It's just up there ahead, you see, the Einsamall Inn and Public House." "We need your mayor, not libations," Igraine said. "Our mission is urgent. Where does he keep his offices?" The watchman laughed. "In the Einsamall Inn," he replied. "Burris Burgestow is not only the mayor, he also owns the inn and is the barkeep of that there fine establishment. Acts as the magistrate in these parts, as well as being a barber, he does. His wife, Berla, she helps with the inn and is also our town seamstress. And not that we need it all that much. Not too many babies being born out here and all, but she's our midwife too. Not too many of us folk up here in Einsamall. No, there isn't. Got to have lots of jobs if you're going to live all the way up here. Look at me. I had to take over as the watchman after we lost the last one who did that job. I also work as a carpenter and a farmer." "How do you farm up here in this cold?" the ranger asked. "You finds a way," the watchman, carpenter, farmer answered with a shrug. "We've been doing it forever now, and here we are." The largest building in the settlement stood before the party. The name Einsamall Inn and Public House was written on an icicle-covered sign that hung from the doorway. Halvard pushed open the heavy door. A warm light and the sounds of music immediately leaked out from inside the inn. The party from the Castle of Foreside stepped inside and found themselves before a packed establishment. In the center of the room was a large bar, and a red-capped gnome stood upon an upturned barrel in front of that bar. A large mug of frothy brew was in his hand as he called out to the room. The music stopped, and all eyes went to the gnome. "The colds won't chase us away when we have the warmth of our hearth and home to look forward to each day. Lift a mug of brew with me and let all hear our call. Cheers to the north and to the people of Einsamall." "Cheers to the north and to the people of Einsamall," the room echoed back in unison before collectively taking a drink from the mugs in front of them. Once they were done, the music started back up again, and the gnome wiped the froth from his large white beard. "Burris," the watchman called, "the castle sent help. I brought them here just like you said to do. I did." The gnome jumped down from where he stood and made his way over to the group. "And you are Burris Burgestow, the mayor of Einsamall?" "Yes," Igraine asked. "That I am," the gnome replied. Come, we have much to discuss, and it's too loud here to speak easily." Burris made his way back to the bar and placed his mug on the top. A female gnome was behind the bar serving drinks. "Berla," the mayor called. "They are here from the Castle of the Beasts. I will take some in back, some from quiet, so I can tell them the tale. Will you be okay out here for a bit?" Berla Burgestow nodded and smiled. "Go on," she said. "I can handle this lot. Don't you worry none." Burris nodded. "Call for Josiah and tell him to make up the last 2 rooms for our guests. The frost monk knows where to find everything, and he's always happy to help whenever He's always happy to help out when needed, Burris added as he motioned for his guests to follow him. Burl replied that she would make sure it was done, and Burris led the party deeper into the inn and through a door in the back corner of the establishment. The door led into the keeper's wing of the building. The inn had not always been owned by gnomes, and thankfully the room was of standard size, even if the furniture beyond its doors was made for the diminutive Burgerstories and was much too small for any of the party to sit in. Sorry, I don't have a better place to bring you, Burris apologized, but this is the only quiet we will find anywhere in the inn these days. Business is booming, the paladin remarked. That must be nice. If only it were under different circumstances, the gnome replied. This public house is the center of the town, and it's where everyone comes to waste away the small hours. That's why I brought it. Figured if I wanted to be mayor, what better place to be seen by the folk of this here town? Besides, people are more likely to vote for you when you're the one who serves them their drinks. The gnome patted the side of a large keg of ale that had the words Wolfsbane Lager, batch 430 painted on the front. This here's my specialty. It's my own recipe. Won't find this out there in your fancy taverns out there in the Four Kingdoms. No, you won't. Had to store a few barrels in here because we just finished up this latest batch. Best one yet, if I do say so myself. I'm sure it's wonderful, but we did not come here to sample your ale, Igraine said. We came because you said you needed help. Yes, of course, the gnome replied. I was just getting to that. As I was saying, we are always busy in the public house, but the beds of the inn are usually empty. Most of the times, the only overnight guests we get are those folk who don't know how to go home after a long night in their cups. But it's never been like this. With the killings, most everyone wants to stay here now. Safety in numbers and all that. We can't keep up, but we can't kick out anyone either. It's just not safe out there. Tell us exactly what is happening. Why did you call us? Igraine said as the party moved aside the small furniture and sat on the floor of the keeper's quarters. Burris pulled up a chair and sat before the group. Did you read the letter I sent? He asked. We did, but we want to hear it from you, from the beginning. The gnome nodded and began to tell his tale. It all started about 5 fortnights ago. One of our local boys went missing. Nice lad, real strong, but sometimes he made poor decisions and got himself in a mess. Sorry, I should not speak ill of the dead. He really was a nice lad, very helpful. Yeah, I used to have him help chop wood here for the inn, and he always was good to have around if a sled got stuck in the drifts. One time, Mayor, Igraine snapped. Please get to the point. Sorry, the gnome said. I'm just tired is all. Tend to ramble a bit when that happens. Anyway, we found the boy dead. At first, we figured he drifted off and got lost in a storm and froze to death, and then something found his body. It was torn apart, all ripped and shredded, but frozen to the ice. We had to chisel him out to bring him back home. What do you think could have done it? Halvard asked. A troll? Maybe, but trolls don't usually come this far north, Burris replied. Some suggested it may have been a Yeti or a Witigo, but neither of those creatures have been seen in these parts in ages. More likely it is something far less monstrous that found the body and had an easy meal, and at least that's what we thought at first. The gnome paused and shifted in his seat before continuing. We had lost 4 in total when we sent that letter to the castle. Since then, we've lost 1 more. By the time we lost the 3rd, we knew that these were not accidents. But our hunters went out and came back with nothing. Something has been coming every few nights, but whatever it is, we cannot find it. We set a guard at the gate at all times, but then we lost the guard to whatever evil has its eyes set on his town. That was the last straw, and it's when I sent that letter asking for help. I didn't know if the castle would listen or if they would even care and be willing to send some warriors, but I thank you for coming. Igraine nodded. And nothing since, she said. No more attacks. 1 more victim, Burris said with a sad look on his face. It was a tough one to swallow. A child. One of the few here in Einsamall. Most of the town is cooped up here in the inn, but the kid grew restless and snuck out of the room she was sharing with her family. She loved to play in the snowdrifts, and we'd had a nice squall the day before. All stuck in here, seems like she just wanted to have some fun. Poor kid. Her parents found her bed empty that next morning, and then we found her body on the ice a few hours later. It was a bad sight. Since that morning, none have gone out after dark. We even stopped the watch once the sun goes down. Hasn't helped keep us safe, so no need to put the watcher at risk. The hunters found nothing, Halvard asked. No tracks, no trace. I did that in the wrong accent. I forgot who I was reading. No tracks, Burris replied. The winds cover all tracks almost immediately, but they did find this. The gnome got up from his chair and went over to a drawer, which he opened. Reaching inside, he removed a large chain. It was only 4 links in total, clearly broken off from a larger chain, but those 4 links were large enough and heavy enough that the gnome struggled to lift it. Halvard took the chain from his host and inspected it. It was somehow warm to the touch. We found it near the girl, Burris said. I don't even know what kind of metal it is. You feel it? It's warm, no? What metal does that? Halvard said he did not know, and he handed the chain to the others he had traveled with. We are thankful you are here, Burris said, but what will you do now? You said it comes at night, correct? Igraine asked. Burris nodded. Nightfall is just a few hours away, Igraine said. We will set up a watch once it grows dark. If something comes, we will be here to meet it. Very good, Burris smiled. Until then, you're our guests. Come, we have apples, we have grapes, we have sausages. Oh, and of course, we have some Wolfsbane lager to warm you up after what I am sure was a long, cold trip to Einsamall. So that's the end of part 3. Again, lots of fun stuff in there. So I threw in Burla, which is, very clearly the Burris was a nod to my good friend Curtis Ackerman. Burla is a nod to his wife, Darla. Darla, if you don't know, she does different soft goods, custom soft goods. So I made her a seamstress. I don't know why I made Curtis's character also a barber. I just thought it was kind of funny to make them all have lots of different jobs up here. I thought that was amusing, but it also tracks with the fact that a really small settlement like this, people would have to wear a lot of hats. I love the fact at the end that he kind of says, and it's funny, when Eric read these stories for approval, he also laughed about how silly the last part of it is, where Burris is like, come, we have apples, we have grapes, we have sausages. Clearly, I'm talking about all of the pieces that come in the Einsamall Inn accessory pack. And it was just such a silly little line to put in that was kind of like a nod to, if you know what's going on here, if you know the actual accessory set, it's kind of silly. So a lot of fun with that. Take a quick drink before we move on. Part 4, Jakul Ironbones. Jakul Ironbones. It is surprising to see people so merry with everything that has happened, Igraine said to Halvard as they sat at a table in the Einsamall Inn public house. These are a hard folk, Halvard replied as he ate a plate of sausages. If they let every hardship defeat them, none would rise to see the day. That may be true, but these seem like extreme circumstances, Igraine answered. Why are they not out looking for whatever's attacking them? How can they sit here while whatever's killing their own is out there? You forget where you are, Igraine of Ethros, Halvard snapped. These are not the front lines of your army. These are people who wished only be left to their lives. That is why they came here in the first place, to get away from all the death and all the fighting. Plunging headfirst into battle is not their natural reaction. He downed his ale and got up from his seat. Excuse me, he said. I need to stretch my legs and get some air. Igraine excused Halvard. Now alone at her table, she found herself looking about the room. These were indeed a hard and hardy people. The harshness of Einsamall did not allow them to be anything else, but Halvard was right. They were not soldiers. They knew how to handle hardships brought on by the weather or local predators, but whatever was attacking them now was beyond these normal threats. There was a monster in Einsamall, or at least that is what the evidence pointed towards. Watch where you are going, roared a deep voice over the din of the room. Igraine turned and saw her party's paladin standing face to face with an angry tundra orc. The orc's body was draped in fur and bones, while a pair of gnarled wooden horns rose from the sides of his dark steel helmet. "Calm down, friend," said the paladin as he put his hands up before him. The orc slapped them away. "I am not a friend," the orc spat, "and you are a long way from home. Lions do not come this far north." All had gone quiet, and everyone was staring at the boisterous orc as he looked about the room. "The lion is far from his den. So is the snake and the eagle and the deer. None of them know the north." "But the bear does," Halvard replied, making his way from the quieted crowd of the inn and into the center of the room. His hands were free of any weapons, but an axe hung at his hip, and he was ready to draw it should the need arise. "Do not doubt the words I speak. Despite this lot I travel with, trust that the bear knows the north as well as any." "Jakku Ironbones, behave yourself," Burris chastised the orc. "They are here by my invitation, and I would have you show some respect." The orc spat on the floor in front of the gnome's feet. "You are not my leader. I do not take no orders from you." "You are allowed here in Einsamall only by our consent," the gnome shot back. "You are not the only hunter around. Where will you trade your kills if we close our doors to you? What do you think of that?" The orc named Jakul snarled, but did not reply. "There is no need to fight," the paladin said as he reached out to pat the orc on the shoulder. "We're here to save you. You should be thanking me and my friends, not picking a quarrel with me." The orc tightened the grip on the bone weapon he carried, and he used it to smash the paladin from Leandor over the head. The big man's knees buckled, and he immediately fell to the ground. "But who will save you?" Jackal roared. Halvard drew his axe and launched forward, but the gnome immediately stepped between him and the orc. "Get out," Burst commanded, staring up at the orc who towered above him. Despite the tundra orc's clear advantage in size and strength, the gnome showed no fear at all, and he did not back down. "Keep your ale and your meat," the orc finally said as he turned and left the inn. "And luck to you when the night comes. Death will be coming. Mark the words Jakul Ironbone speaks." The paladin rubbed the lump on his head, and he shakily tried to regain his feet as he watched the angry orc disappear into the swirling white snows of Einsamall. Night came to the far north, and the adventurers from the Castle of Four Sides prepared for their first night in Einsamall. The paladin assured Commander Igraine that he was fine and that the orc's blow had simply caught him by surprise. He refused to miss the watch and insisted that he would join the others. Igraine assigned each of her fellow soldiers a position along the perimeter gates surrounding Einsamall. The main gate where their party had entered was the primary road to the settlement. At least one attack had happened there with the taking of the previous watchman. But there was no telling if whatever evil they were contending with was gaining access to the town by that path or from some other way. From their various vantage points, the heroes could observe almost the entire perimeter of Einsamall. If something came for them this night, they would see it and they would be ready. Jakul Ironbone sat on his throne. Chiseled from the rock of the mountain itself, it sat inside the deep cavern that the tundra orc claimed as his lair. The orc tore a piece of bloody meat off the bone that he held, his latest kill providing him with his evening's meal. He was the best hunter in the north, and he traveled great distances to seek his prey. Einsamall needed the meat he provided, and they would regret sending him away. Jackal tossed the remains of his meal aside and rose from his throne. He would not let this insult stand. He was Jackal Ironbones, and he would show the weaklings of Einsamall what they were up against. They would never forget his name, the hunter known as Old Ironbones. Igraine had taken the patrol at the main gate. It was the most accessible route into the settlement and therefore the most likely to be attacked. So as the leader of this mission, that is where she set herself. The night had been quiet thus far, and Igraine found her eyes growing heavy. She was a soldier and she was disciplined, but she knew that she needed to sleep soon. She questioned whether they should have rested after speaking with the mayor before they set out for the night's watch. It made sense in retrospect, but there was no way to change that decision now. Night was upon them and sleep was far away. A blood-curdling scream cut through the night, immediately jolting Igraine alert and driving any weariness from her bones. "Help!" came the scream. "Help me!" Igraine jumped down from the watcher's platform and ran towards the screams. They were coming from the other side of the settlement. She saw Halvard to her left, running in the same direction that she was. His cloak trailed behind him, and he held his axe and shield in his hands. "It is the paladin," he called to Igraine. "Something has him." Igraine hadn't recognized the voice at first, but the screams continued, and she knew that Halvard was right. It was the paladin from Leandor, and he was obviously in trouble. "What is going on?" asked the mage and the ranger as they came around the corner to meet Igraine and Halvard. "Look," said Halvard. The large wooden fence that sat at the northwestern corner of the settlement laid before them. A tattered piece of red fabric with the golden lion of Laodicea hung from the top of the fence, and blood dripped from what had once been the paladin's cape. The red blood stood out against the white snow below as it dripped down and slowly formed a pool at the base of the fence. "Listen, he's alive," Halvard said. Sure enough, they could hear screams over the wind, fading slowly into the night as something dragged the paladin away. "Come on," Igraine said as she grabbed a torch and ran towards the front gates. "We're going after him." It had been a dangerous plan, and one that Igraine had not fully considered. She had instinctively reacted to the loss of someone under her command. She had seen many of her fellow soldiers fall in battle, but this was her first true command, and as such, the first of her own troops who had been lost. In the end, the decision to pursue whatever had taken the paladin was inconsequential. They did not find their fellow traveler, nor did they encounter whatever had taken him. As the sun began to rise, the heroes returned to Einsamall alone. Probably my favorite line that Halvard gets to say is in that chapter. So when the orc is looking and he says to the paladin, the lion doesn't come this far north. The lion is far from his den, and so is the snake and the deer and the eagle. And he's pointing to all the members of the party, the members of the Legions of Light. And he points to them all and he says that you don't know the north. And then Halvard stands up and he says, "But the bear does." So, right there, he kind of puts himself up against Jackal and tells him, "Hey, don't make no mistake, just because I travel with this group of Southerners, I am of the North. I know what it's like up here." So right there, he kind of puts himself at that same level as Jackal and challenges him. This is the point where even when we even revealed this, we kind of throw some suspicion on the orc as like, okay, this is a character who could be the one who is causing all of this, this carnage and chaos up here. Obviously, orcs are very, mistrusted in everything based on the fact that many of them fought for the Legion of Erethyr. And we're going to see that kind of unfold a little bit, of course, as we start to discover who is really responsible for everything here. Brings us to part 5. Once again, we are going to go a little late tonight because I still have a couple chapters left, including a very long one at the end. It had to have been the orc, Igraine said. This is part 5, by the way. Byler Frostfur. The entire party was weary, but none of them could sleep after the events of the previous night. They sat back in the room of the inn while Burla served them bowls of porridge and more plates of sausages. "Jackal is one tough customer," Burris replied, "but this is not like him. Why would he want to kill our people? He needs us in our trade as much as we need him in the game he brings for us." "He is not part of Einsamall, is he?" Igraine asked. "It depends what you mean. Einsamall is the name we use for our town and also for this area of the Northlands as a whole," Burris explained. "The orc is not townsfolk, but he is unsworn like the rest of us, and he lives in this area. He's had his share of scrapes with some of the townsfolk for sure, but he's been around for years and years. We've never had any serious trouble with him. It just doesn't make sense for him to be behind any of this." "You saw him have words with our party yesterday," Igraine said. "And then our paladin turns up dead. The same paladin that this Jackal Ironbones confronted in your inn. That is too much of a coincidence for us to ignore. And as of now, the orc is our best lead. We need to find him and bring him back here to be questioned." The gnome sighed. He did not believe that Jackal was behind the killings or that he had taken the paladin, but he had to admit that it looked bad for the orc, and he did not have a better potential suspect to offer up in place of old Ironbones. I know someone who can find his lair, Burris finally said. But before he could finish, the mage and the ranger entered the room. They were wrapped in their heavy cloaks with their packs upon their backs. Where are you going? Igraine said. We're headed back to the Castle of Four Sides, the mage replied. What? Igraine said. Well, you can't leave now. Our mission was to find out what is happening up here and to help if we could or report back if we couldn't. We've now lost one of our own, and we believe there's a chance that this orc is part of a hidden force from the Legion of Erethyr. There could be an enemy force who survived the Second Great War has been hiding up here in the north. That is ridiculous, Burris snapped. The Tundra orcs never fought for Erethyr. How would you know who fought for who? Weren't you up here hiding in Einsamall during the war? The mage shot back. Don't presume that you know what I know, Burris answered. I was not born in the far north. I traveled in Mythos. I've seen your Tower of Wizards, or at least I had before it fell. I know something of the realm and its people, and I tell you the Tundra orcs were never aligned with Erethyr or his warmonger. Then maybe this orc and his kin are with one of the other evil powers, the Xylernian ranger chimed in. That is not important. What is important is that we need to return to the castle to report what has happened. If the Five Seats so wish, they can send a larger party to hunt down the orc or whatever else may be at play here. These people will not survive if we leave them, Igraine pleaded. You go and you assure their deaths. If we stay, we assure our own, the mage answered. I'm sorry, Commander, but my first allegiance is to my faction and my second is to the Five Seats. Staying in Einsamall and laying down my life for people who would not do the same for us when we needed help is a fool's task. Our mission was to help these people, Igraine replied, making sure her words were firm and left no room for debate. And I command you to stay and fight with me. The mage and the ranger were silent. Very well, Commander Igraine, the mage finally replied. You are our leader, after all. Igraine nodded and then excused herself. The exchange had shaken her, and she couldn't avoid sleep any longer. Her body needed rest, and her eyes closed as soon as her head hit the pillow. Igraine's eyes opened to see the light of the mid-afternoon sun shining into the room. They are gone, called a voice to her left. Igraine started and turned quickly, but it was just Halvard who sat in the room beside her. What are you saying? She asked as she rubbed the fogginess of sleep from her eyes. The mage and the ranger, he repeated. They left shortly after you came upstairs. Did you try to stop them? Igraine said as she bolted out of bed. How long ago did they leave? I did not try to stop them. Their minds were made up, and they will be too far away for us to try to catch them. The mage used a transport spell. May not work, I don't know. But they were eager enough to leave to try it anyway. Igraine swore and slammed her fist down on the nightstand beside her. It was her first command, as she had now lost one soldier to violence and seen two more abandon their posts. General Delphina would not be impressed by her results, and Igraine fully expected to be demoted upon her return to the castle. Come on, Halvard said. You are awake. Now we must go. I'm not leaving these people, Igraine said. Neither am I, Halvard replied. The gnome found us a tracker. We do not run from this fight. We go to seek it out. What manner of creature are you? Igraine asked in amazement as she looked at the fox-like creature before her. I'm a Vulpine, came the reply in a small voice that matched the size of its speaker. Byler Frostfur is my name. Your race is not known in our kingdoms, Halvard said, explaining the look of surprise on Igraine's face. Not even in the colds of Bjorngar have we seen your kin. Well met, Burris said. I'm so used to Byler here that I hadn't even remembered that I had a similar reaction when I first met him and his family. Natives to this area, by what I can tell. But that's not important right now. What is important is that he can help you find Jackal. We don't have much light left, Byler said. Heading out now would be bad. We go at first light. Good? Igraine began to protest that there was no time to lose, but the Vulpine tracker was unmovable in his insistence that they had to wait until morning. Eventually, Igraine stopped arguing, realizing that there was no changing Byler's mind. Whatever was out there waiting for them would have to wait for another day. Igraine and Halvard found Byler by the fire that next morning, just as the rays of light began to make their way into the sky. The tracker had a frying pan on the fire as he cooked up a few of the sausage links that seemed to be a part of every meal in Einsamall, along with some chunks of heavily seasoned potatoes. "For you," he said as he offered food to his two new companions. Igraine accepted a plate and passed another to Halvard. "Eat up fast, then we go," Byler said as he devoured the food in front of him and licked his lips to clean up any last bits of greasy goodness. The pan sizzled in the snow as the Vulpine cleaned it off and clipped it to a pack that he hoisted upon his back. "Come," he said, "I will take you now." Igraine and Halvard struggled to keep up with the tracker. Despite the small size of his legs, the Vulpine was incredibly fast and agile, and his furry pawed feet allowed him to seemingly bounce off the icy terrain as he easily navigated the landscape before them. Even the armor that Byler wore did not seem to slow him up as he bounded ahead with his walking stick in one hand and a small blade at his side. "I'm surprised to see you in heavy armor," Igraine said, more to break the silence than anything else. Neither Byler nor Halvard were big talkers, and it was too quiet for Igraine's liking. "The North is dangerous," Byler shrugged. "Armor keeps me safe." "It's not too heavy?" "Too heavy for me? No, look, I can still jump," Byler said as he bounded before them, clearly proving that his choice of armament did not impede his mobility. Suddenly, the tracker stopped. "Shh," he said. "Stay." Byler motioned for Igraine and Halvard to get down. Once they had crouched down, the tracker took off, bounding ahead and making his way over a large snowdrift. He returned a short time later and quietly reported what he had found. "The orc's cave is near," he said. "We must be quiet. He is a hunter. He can hear. He can smell." The trio made their way quietly forward, eventually finding a spot where they could clearly see the mouth of a large cave, but where they were also somewhat hidden from view. "Do you see Jackal?" Igraine asked. "Shh," Byler scolded. "Look and see." They watched in silence as the cold winds whipped around them. Igraine pulled her cloak closer and wondered how long they would have to wait for some sign of their quarry. "There," Byler whispered, pointing to the horizon. Three shapes began to emerge from the distance. One was very small, one quite large, and one was very, very large. "They come," the tracker said. "Stay down." The sun was getting low in the sky, and it shined from behind the three approaching forms, silhouetting them against the horizon. As they grew closer, Igraine began to make out what she was seeing. The tundra orc, Jackal Ironbones, was the large form they had seen. He trudged along holding his bone club. In front of him waddled a small goblin-like creature with the same ice blue skin as the orc. This was the smallest of the three approaching forms. Igraine had seen her share of goblins during the Second Great War, but never one like this. His little red eyes darted about as he scouted ahead. Igraine hoped that she wouldn't see them, and thankfully his gaze never drifted their way. The final form, and the largest of the three, took Igraine's breath away, and it suddenly made the direness and danger of their situation very, very clear. "Isbjorn," Halvard whispered before translating. "It's an ice bear." So, a couple fun things there. First off, there's an ongoing joke about sausages. So every meal I've had people eating has included sausages in this, which I just thought was funny. I even address in this particular chapter where they're eating sausages, and I say that it seems to be like every meal includes sausages. One thing that I threw in kind of just for my own enjoyment and fun was them questioning how a tracker could be wearing armor, because that was one of the comments that people made when this figure was revealed. They're like, why would a tracker be wearing armor? So I just threw that in there kind of as a little bit of, I guess it's a little meta. Him just addressing the fact that even in the armor, he can still bounce around no problem, and he wears it because he needs the protection, that this is a very dangerous place. I enjoy putting in little kind of things like that are fairly self-aware. One that I didn't mention previously is in one of the other chapters where they're talking to Burris, And Halvard says, what do you think did it? Do you think it was a troll? And he says, nah, trolls don't come this far north. Some people thought it was a Yeti or a Witico, which Witico is a different way of saying Wendigo. And I threw those in there because when people were kind of figuring out like what's going to be attacking, when we showed that teaser with that bloody sign, some people had suggested werewolf, which is what it was, but I saw some people suggest Yeti and some people suggest Wendigo. So I threw that in there as a very self-aware little nod to, some people thought it was maybe a Yeti or a Wendigo, but neither of them have been seen up in the north for a long time. So just stuff like that I thought was very fun, very, very self-aware little Easter eggs that I like to throw into these stories. Part 6, Isbjorn. The problem before them was suddenly very clear and also much bigger than they had bargained for. Igraine had expected that they would need to contend with the Tundra Orc and whatever violent grudge he had for the people of Einsamall, but looking out at the massive white bear that trailed behind the Orc, she knew that they had greatly underestimated what they were up against. We must go, Byler said as he began to scamper away. We must go now. Yes, you're right, Curtis. Not a werewolf. Doesn't transform. It's a Fenrirkin, but easier to say werewolf. Halvard and Igraine followed, doing their best not to disturb the icy landscape or alert their quarry to their presence. They had to get back to the inn so they could figure out how they would deal with the ice bear that Jackal Ironbones had seemingly turned against Einsamall. How big was the bear? Burris asked, amazed at the story that the trio had told after arriving back at the Einsamall Inn and Public House. Best guess, 150 to 160 stone, Halvard replied, in solid muscle. If we'd attacked, we could not take the creature down with just the weapons we have. We need to find a way to incapacitate it if we hope to stop it. A trap, Igraine asked? You want us to capture it? It's our only chance. In a street fight, we do not have the strength and numbers to overwhelm it. The bear would take us down one by one before we could do enough damage to stop it. If we trap it, we can render its claws and bite useless and give ourselves a chance to strike the killing blow. Are you sure the bear is our killer? Burris asked. I have to say that I'm still not convinced that Jackal's behind all this. He has a fully grown ice bear that he keeps in his lair, Igraine replied. You said that the Orc is well known here in Einsamall, but I expect he failed to mention that he's housing a 160 stone ice bear. No? Burris did not reply, his silence answering the question for him. He kept the fact that he had this bear from you for some reason, Igraine continued. The victims of Einsamall were torn to shreds. The claws in this bear were gigantic. They absolutely could have made those wounds you've described. Burris contemplated the situation and finally nodded his head in agreement. Something felt off to him, but he had to accept what was in front of him, and the likeliest answer was that the Orc's bear was the monster that had terrorized his people. What is your plan? The gnome finally asked. How will we catch this beast? The trap was set. Halvard and Byler had come up with a contraption that would ensnare the bear's feet when it walked upon the trap, rendering the powerful claws useless and making it nearly impossible for the creature to move. With the bear trap, they expected that the Orc would immediately attack, and perhaps even the goblin would prove to be a threat if they were all together on the hunt. This meant that they would need to deal with Jackal quickly and stop him before the bear had time to break free and join the fight. To this end, Igraine asked for every able-bodied resident of Einsamall to take up arms and be ready. Halvard was right. They were not an army, but they were defending themselves from something that had taken some of their own, and those who remained would do whatever they had to in order to end this nightmare. He will come at night, Halvard said as he planned their course of action. They had emptied the town and brought everyone to the inn. Most of the town's residents were there already, and the few who resisted coming over for safety were eventually convinced of the need to do so. There was no one in the streets of Einsamall, and the entire town was eerily quiet. We have a few hours before dark, Igraine said to Halvard, slapping him on the back. Come, we will eat whatever food we can find, probably some sausages, and share stories of the wars we have fought, the battles we have won, and those we said goodbye to along the way. Commander Igraine and Halvard of Frothvar downed their 4th pints of Burris's Wolfsbane lager. They had both seen battle during the Second Great War, and they had both bled for their kingdoms. Since the end of that war, they had found themselves sitting in debates at the Castle of Four Sides rather than wielding weapons against the enemies of the realm. For a barbarian soldier from the coals of Bjorngar and a young knight raised on the warm coast of Etheros, these two warriors discovered that they had much more in common than one would initially expect. They were both proud warriors who believed their time of usefulness had passed and that the glory of the death and the duty of the battle had slipped from them. "Do you miss the battles?" Igraine asked, someone embarrassed to do so. "Aye," Halvard nodded. "We fought for peace and we got it, so why aren't we happy?" Igraine mused. It was a question she had quietly considered and asked herself many times, but this was the first time she had ever vocalized those sentiments to another. We shouldn't long for war. It's not natural and it's not right. "Such is the curse of the soldier," Halvard answered. "We fight for a peace that we cannot ourselves enjoy." Suddenly, the doors of the inn burst open and Jackal Ironbones flew into the room. Igraine and Halvard jumped from their seats and drew their blades, but the pair immediately noticed that the Tundra Orc was not wielding a weapon. They also saw that he was covered in blood, but he didn't have any visible wounds on him. "It's attacking," he barked. "Get your weapons! The monster is here!" The bear's roar came from outside the doors of the inn, and the orc turned back towards the doorway he had entered from. Had the bear gone mad and attacked the orc? That couldn't be it. Jackal didn't appear to be wounded, despite the blood on his chest and hands, but something had been hurt, and by the amount of blood on the orc, it had been a significant attack. Another roar cut through the night air. It was a clear challenge from a beast trying to claim its dominance. The beast's roar was followed by another sound, a blood-curdling howl that answered the beast's challenge. Jackal Ironbones turned and ran from the inn, a cold fear in his eyes as he rushed into the night. Igraine and Halvard followed him with their weapons ready. They expected to see the ice bear before them, crazed and ready for a fight, and perhaps caught in the trap they had set. Even if the bear was not in their trap, the heroes knew that they would need to fight the beast. They were ready to die protecting the people of Einsamall. Making their way outside the inn, they did indeed see Jackal's white bear, but not as they expected. The massive ice bear was locked in a battle with something that was somehow even larger than it was. The bear's muzzle was torn and blood had turned much of its white fur red. The great bear roared again in pain and confusion as it grappled with its enemy. This beast was an apex predator, and nothing had ever truly challenged its dominance. But now it struggled for survival as it looked into the green eyes of a creature that was stronger, more ferocious, and more dangerous than it was. "Roar!" the Tundra Orc yelled as he rushed forward to help the bear. The monster before them brushed the orc aside without a second thought and sunk his teeth into the side of the bear's neck. The wounded ice bear let out a sad wail, and his grip on his opponent slowly relaxed as his body started to go limp. Igraine gasped as the monster lifted up the entire massive weight of the bear and easily tossed it aside. The bear's body crashed into the icy landscape and slid a short distance before coming to a stop, blood seeping from its numerous wounds. It did not move any longer, and Igraine and Halvard could not tell if it was breathing. The heroes from the Castle of Four Sides looked in stunned silence at the answer to the question they had sought. What was attacking the people of Einsamall? Now they knew that answer, and each held their breath as the monster turned to face them. They held their breaths as they looked into the wolf-like eyes of the towering nightmare, its terrible blood-soaked teeth bared in a vicious snarl. The monster reared its head back and let out a howl of challenge once again. The horror of Einsamall had returned. The Horror of Einsamall, Part 7, Garmer. The ancient sagas of the Northlands tell of a monstrous creature known as a Fenrican. Towering beast said to be the offspring of the great wolf, there had not been a confirmed sighting of one of these creatures in mythos in ages, and their existence was deemed the stuff of fiction long ago. As Igraine, Halvard, and the surviving residents of Einsamall looked out across the frozen landscape before them, they realized that the stories of these monsters were not a fiction after all. The Fenrican existed, and one had come to hunt in the colds of Einsamall. Commander Igraine and Halvar Frothvar gripped their weapons and planted their feet, preparing for the assault they knew was coming. The beast before them stood well over 9 feet tall. Its body was thick with powerful muscles and covered in great fur. It was clad in strange armor with chains hanging off it in many places, including a pair of large shackles that covered its lower arms. The armor was gouged and broken in places, and the chains were snapped. At a glance, it was clear that they were some of the same kind of chains that Burris had shown them earlier, chains that seemed to suggest that this monster had been a captive at some point. Those broken restraints suggested that it had escaped its captor. Fleeing whoever had once bound it, the wolf had somehow made its way into Einsamall. "Is it from the brood?" Halvard said to Igraine. "Its belt, look!" Igraine noticed the emblem at the Fenrikins' waist. It was a vampiric sigil, and the markings on the beast's armor also had a brutish feel to them, but unlike any that Igraine had ever seen on Alithia's faction. The vampires had been soundly defeated during the Second Great War, and their vampiric mother had been killed. Or had she? It had been nearly 10 years since the Dark Four had fallen, and whatever remained of the brood had been silent all these years. But looking at the motifs on the armor of the wolf-like creature before her now, Igraine questioned whether the vampiric threat had really been defeated, or if, perhaps, it had gone into hiding in the coldest places of the realm. The Fenrikin howled and drew a large obsidian sword. The black blade glistened in the moonlight, and the beast bared its cavernous mouth of teeth, ready to tear into whomever stood in its way. "Here it comes," Halvard said as the beast charged. The wolf swung his black-bladed sword, and Halvard used his shield to block the blow. The force of the attack was incredible, and Halvard nearly lost his footing, but he held strong and pushed the sword away with his shield. The Fenrikin was focused on Halvard, and so Igraine used the beast's distraction to find an opening to attack. Her broadsword sliced deeply into the monster's leg, and it roared in pain and surprise. Turning towards Igraine, it lashed out with a wicked claw. Igraine could not believe the beast's speed, and she had just enough time to turn so that her shoulder armor caught the brunt of the blow. The monster's claws raked across her armor. While that armor did its duty and protected Igraine, the force of the blow knocked her off her feet and threw her back across the ice. Two of Einsamall's hunters leaped forward to attack next, but the wolf mowed them both down with a single swing of his sword. The blade tore through the hunters, spraying an arc of blood across the front of the inn as their bodies fell lifelessly to the snow. Halvard let out a battle cry, and he threw his axe at the beast. The blade clanged harmlessly off its black armor, and the weapon flew far away from Halvard's reach. The wolf attacked Halvard again, and the barbarian held his shield out before him to deflect the torrent of blows. The wood of his shield began to splinter, and Halvard knew that it would fail him soon, leaving him defenseless against the monster's attacks. "Wolf beast!" called the gnome innkeeper as he rushed out into the night. The monster turned to the sound just in time to see the gnome toss a bottle towards him. Instinctively, the monster swiped at the projectile headed his way, shattering it before it could reach him. As the glass broke, the liquid inside it sprayed across the beast, soaking into its fur and dripping from its armor. "Quick!" Burris yelled as he looked at Igraine. "Throw a torch at it! Set it on fire!" Igraine did not have to be told twice. She grabbed the torch from outside the inn and hurled it towards the wolf. Once again, the monster swatted at the projectile, and the flames of the torch exploded in a shower of embers, igniting the liquid that dripped from the creature's body. The wolf let out a howl of surprise and pain as flames raced up its chest and arms. It dropped the obsidian blade and tried to bat at the flames to extinguish them, but the bottle that Burris had thrown was filled with pure gnomish moonshine, and there were few substances in Mythos more flammable than that. Howling in anger and pain, the wolf turned and bolted away, the flame still trailing off its body as it disappeared into the night. "Hurry!" Burris called. "Into the inn. It will be back soon. We need to block the door." Everyone poured into the Einsamall Inn and public house. Halvard and a few other men began to move tables and chairs against the doorway to reinforce it against the beast that they knew would soon return. Cries of fear and anguish could be heard in the inn, for the horror that had come to Einsamall was so much worse than the townfolk had ever imagined. They were a strong, hard people in the far north, but the sight of the Fenrikin broke them. The innkeeper's wife tried to calm those who were most distraught. Bring them upstairs, Burris said. Only those who can fight should stay down here. If the beast gets in, we'll try to at least keep them away from the upstairs rooms. Burla Burgerstory nodded and ushered dozens into the upper levels of the inn. Only a handful of the town's residents remained on the ground floor. They held weapons in their hands, but the fear was clear in their eyes and in their heavy, labored breathing. Speak true. Can we kill it? Agreed House Halvard. She had lost her sword outside and instead found a large warhammer that she lifted with both hands. She retrieved her helmet from her pack and placed it on her head, ready for the next assault. I don't know, Halvard admitted. He also put on his helmet. The chainmail of the helmet covered his lower face, and he drew a short sword from the side of his belt. He still held his shield, and he gripped that as well. A loud bang knocked the doors in. Let me in, called a deep voice. Open up. It's Jackal, Burris commanded. Quick, open the door. Let him in. The men began to dismantle the barrier they had constructed so they could open the door. Once they had done so, the Tundra Orc flew inside the room. Where's the bear? Halvard asked. Dead? Wounded, but not dead. Escaped, the Orc replied as he helped rebuild the barricade. The work was completed just in time as the door began to rattle with thunderous blows. The Fenrican was back, and it desperately wanted to get inside. Brace the door, Igraine commanded. Halvard, Jakul, and a dozen others pressed themselves against the makeshift blockade to reinforce it against the attack of the howling monster on the other side of the doorway. Byler Frostfur had jumped upon the bar, his small sword drawn as he sniffed the air and looked about the room. He's moving, the tracker called. Listen, there! The attack at the door had ceased, and the room was silent as everyone listened. Is there another way inside? Igraine asked Burris. 2 other doors, the gnome replied, but one is the hatchway that is buried under the ice, and the other's in the storerooms, blocked by piles of debris. We boarded up all the windows and secured them after the 3rd attack. The windows began to rattle and shake as the Fenrican tested each one, trying to find a way inside. The inhabitants of the inns listened as the monster crept outside. All would be silent for a time before violent shaking would rattle the window as the beast tried to break in. How long will those windows hold? Igraine asked. They are strong, but eventually that thing will find a way in, Halvard said. The door began to rattle once again as pounding blows rained upon it. The wolf had moved back to that entrance and was now hacking away at the thick wood with its obsidian blade, chopping into the door and splintering it with each blow. Get ready, Halvard called. We stand against a great evil on this day, knowing that our lives have been lived well and our ends shall be the stuff of which tales of honor and duty are written. The Tundra Orc repeatedly slammed his bone club against his shoulder armor and roared in appreciation of Halvard's words. Igraine gripped her hammer, and Byler prepared to pounce upon whatever entered the inn. Even the mayor of Einsamall was armed and ready to defend his home, a pickaxe gripped tightly in his small hands. Suddenly, the rattling at the door stopped, and all went quiet once again. Is he going back to the windows? Igraine asked. No, Byler replied as he sniffed the air, confusion on his face. Something else is out there. The wolf let out another terrible howl. It was a challenge, similar to how he had called out a challenge to the ice bear earlier that night. Is the bear back? Halvard asked. He may be, the orc said. Isbjorn has never been beaten. He may have come back to fight again. We need to see what's happening out there, one of the men of Einsamall said. Open the door. Do not open that doorway, Igraine commanded. Whatever has come to challenge the wolf, we cannot risk opening that door. These were hard words for Igraine to say, for the warrior in her wanted nothing more than rush into the night and engage the beast in battle once again. But she was more than a soldier now. She was a commander, and every life in that inn was hers to defend. The best way she could do so was by keeping that door closed. Let me see what I can see, Burris said as he tried to peek out a crack in the side of the doorway. He had wedged his small body between the barricade and was trying to catch a glimpse of what was happening outside without opening the door. I cannot see clearly, but I do see shapes moving. Bodies, perhaps. There are many of them. I do not think it's the bear. I think something else is fighting the monster. What else could be out there? Halvard asked Byler. I do not know, the tracker replied. The smells are not ones I know, and sounds are so quiet. All I can sense for sure is Wolf Beast, and he is mad. The sounds of the struggle echoed in the night. Chains rattled and the wolf howled, but eventually all went quiet once again. "What do you see?" Igraine asked Burris. He was still trying to peek through a small crack in the doorway. "Nothing," he replied. "I can't see anything anymore." "The wolf is gone," Byler finally announced. "No more smell, all gone." "Can we open the door then?" Halvard asked. "Is it safe?" The tracker nodded and jumped down from the bar. The barricade was slowly removed from the front of the doorway. The survivors, clearly hesitant to dismantle their defenses and head back into the cold where the wolf may still be prowling about. Eventually, the last table was shoved aside and the door was opened. Halvard was first to walk outside the inn, his shield held out before him and a short sword in hand. Igraine followed with the Tundra Orc and the residents of Einsamall who had chosen to stand with them behind her. "The door didn't have much left," Halvard said as he pointed to the front of the door's inn. The black blade was stuck deep in the wood and splinters were strewn about the snow in front of the doorway. The wolf's blows would have destroyed the door had something not interrupted its attack. Dawn had come and the sun was just starting to rise in the sky. They had survived the night and the monster was nowhere to be seen. "What is that?" Igraine said as she spotted something across the ice at the edge of the settlement. Jackal made his way over to investigate and he retrieved the object. It was a large muzzle-like contraption made of heavy iron with a pair of fangs protruding from the front. A large chain hung from the middle of the muzzle. "The beast had been a captive," Halvard said. "That was clear from the chains it bore. Someone must have come back for it." "Who in the Creator's name could have captured that monster?" Igraine said as she inspected the muzzle. "What could possibly have defeated it? We tried, all of us together, and we did nothing but make it angrier." "He is gone," Byler confirmed. "No more wolf beast." "For now, at least. But we need to know what has happened and if it is truly gone," Igraine said. "Until we know for certain, we won't know if these people are safe or if that thing will return." "Can you track where it was taking?" The Vulpine tracker nodded. "Okay, then," Igraine said as she retrieved her sword from the snow where it had fallen. She looked at Halvard and her companion nodded his understanding of what she would command. She turned to the orc next. "Go find your bear. You're coming with us." "Where are we going?" "Wherever the tracker leads us," Igraine replied. "We were sent here to discover what the horror of Einsamall is. We did that, and now we are going to hunt it." So that was the end of the story. Some fun things that I did that I was happy to do throughout it. If you notice, there's a scene in there where Igraine uses the hammer and puts her helmet on, and Halvard puts the helmet on. She throws a torch. Like all of the accessories that they actually came with, I made it a point to include in the story. Now that was the last bit of the story I posted, but there's one more piece. So I held it off until tonight, the last piece of the story, which is the Horror of Einsamall Part 8, the Epilogue. So I'm going to read that for the first time right now. I will post it tomorrow morning. Actually, I'll post it as soon as this show is done if you want to read it for yourself. But right now, I'm going to read it. The hunt had been on for 3 full days. The Vulpine tracker, Byler Frostfur, led the way with Commander Igraine and Halvard of Frothvar close behind. The Tundra Orc and his Ice Bear guarded the rear of the hunting party. Even the gnomish mayor of Einsamall had insisted on being a part of the hunt for the Fenrican monster who had terrorized his town and then mysteriously disappeared. He rode upon the bear's back, which was the only logical option since his short legs would have slowed down the others. The group had barely stopped to eat or sleep since they had left Einsamall. Finding the beast and ending the threat it posed carried them all forward and gave them the strength needed to push ahead. "Do you still have the trail?" Igraine asked Byler as he sniffed the air. The tracker nodded that he did. He had caught the scent of the wolf-like Fenrican shortly after the second killing, but having never encountered one of the beasts before, had assumed that the wolfish scent belonged to one of the common packs that roamed the icy peaks of Einsamall. Once he had seen the monstrous beast for himself, he knew that he had been wrong and that the scent was now impossible for him to miss. "I can smell it," Byler said, "but it goes down under." "Down? What do you mean?" Halvard asked. "I don't smell the wolf in front of us," Tracker answered. I smell it under the ice, under our feet. Arr, the tracker has lost the trail, Jackal barked. I have not, Byler said defensively. Look at the bear. He knows. Isbjorn the bear was sniffing the ground and it began to paw at something that it clearly sensed under the ice. Is there something down there? Igraine asked. The words barely left her mouth when the world around them began to shake. Hold on, Halvard cried as a thunderous roar echoed in the air and waves of snow and ice toppled from mountain peaks. Jakul caught Burris as the gnome fell from the bear's back, and both Igraine and Halvard took a knee to steady themselves. Thankfully, they were in the open of the ice shelf and not in the shadows of a mountain, so the avalanches of snow that crashed down from Einsamall's highest peaks were not a threat to them. Those avalanches would absolutely make the way back to Einsamall harder, however, should they be able to find the way back at all. Another tremor shook the ice, and the travelers fell to the ground once again. Byler! Harvard yelled as a giant fissure opened in the ice shelf, and the Vulpine tracker disappeared into the gaping maw. We need to help him, Igraine said as she tried to rise and run towards the fissure, but a third tremor knocked her back down again. Suddenly, the shaking stopped, and everything was eerily quiet. Is he gone? Igraine asked as they raced toward the giant crack that had torn itself into the ice before them. Byler, are you down there? Halvard yelled down into the crevasse. I am here, called a soft voice back. Are you safe? Igraine called down into the darkness. I am safe, the tracker called back before adding, you need to come down here and see this. It was decided that Igraine and Halvard would rappel down into the crevasse. A long rope was tied to the bear to provide them an anchor point. Jackal needed to stay behind to control the bear, and Burris simply wasn't strong enough for this task, his years of mining deep caverns long behind him now. Do not leave us here, Halvard said to the orc. A few days ago, they had suspected Jackal Ironbones of being the killer of Einsamall. Today, they were trusting him with their lives. You will not die by my hand, the Tundra orc replied. I will hold the rope for you and bring you up when you call. This is the word of Jackal Ironbones. Halvard nodded, satisfied with the orc's promise. Down we go, he said, as he and Igraine gripped the rope and slowly made their way into the darkness beneath the ice. Keep coming. You are getting close, came Byler's voice. The crevasse was deep, and it was a miracle that the tracker had fallen all this way without injury. Igraine felt her feet touch solid ground. Good, Byler said. Now, Halvard, come next. Halvard touched down. The air was somehow a bit warmer, and they were no longer in pure darkness. He hadn't noticed it as they made their way down into the rift, but now that his feet had touched solid ground again, he realized that the air felt and smelled so much differently than it had on the surface. It was salt water. He was smelling the ocean. Halvard, Igraine said softly, look. Halvard looked ahead and saw they were in a very long and narrow cavern, and at the end of that cavern was an opening that was the source of the dim light they were seeing. The opening was far away, but not so far that they couldn't see what lay beyond it. They saw the blue expanse of a great body of water. The smell of the wolf, Byler said, pointing towards the end of the cavern. It goes that way, and then it fades. The trio carefully made their way towards the end of the cavern, the light growing brighter as they came closer and closer to the end. Finally, they stood upon the edge of the cavern, and what lay before them was not the vast ice sheet of the Northlands, but the deep blue stretch of a great sea. It was an inlet. It was a hidden inlet of water that seemingly ran under the ice, emptying into the cold waves of a bay that stretched further than they could see. The wolf is there, Byler said, pointing to a receding shape on the horizon. A great black ship with blood-red sails slowly sailed away, its form moving further and further away until it was little more than a dot on the horizon. Who are they? Igraine asked. And where are they going? Byler shook his head. I do not know, he replied. There are no ports around here, and here shouldn't be here. This is new. Have you ever been this far away from town? Halvard asked. The tracker nodded. Once, he said. And this was not here? This water? Byler shook his head. Just ice, he replied. The ice stretches and stretches to a cliff, but not water below, just more ice and more snow. This was under the ice, Igraine said, looking at the expanse of sea before them, hidden away somehow. Not hidden, Byler said. Not here. Smells were different. This is new. I tell you, this is new. Igraine thought for a moment before speaking again. Remember what Asa Spiritbender said in the audience chamber at the castle? She asked as she looked at Halvard. She said that the convocation had detected some kind of anomaly here in the north. Could this be it? A hidden cavern under the ice leading to an unknown bay that dumps into the sea? Halvard said. You think that is the strangeness that Spiritbender spoke of? Perhaps, Igraine replied. I mean, look at this sea. What sea is it? Have you ever seen a body of water like this one on a map of the Northlands? I have not, and I've looked at many a map of Mythos. The tracker is right. This should not be here. Halvard, where are we? Halvard shook his head. He did not have any answers. The Fenrican was gone, a fairy tale nightmare proven to be all too real, which had left a bloody mark upon the ice of the Northlands. Still, while the monster may have disappeared, something told Halvard that this was just the beginning of the troubles the heroes of Mythos would soon face, and that those troubles would stretch far beyond the frozen peaks of Einsamall. And that is the end of the Horror of Einsamall story. So that 8th and final chapter was the one that we held back specifically so I could reveal it tonight. And it kind of gives a little bit of closure while still opening a door to, some other stuff that's going to be coming. As many of you posted in the comments, we find out the bear does survive, Isbjorn does survive, and kind of in the end, we get a cool little team, right? So we kind of put all these characters together, which I had said right at the beginning when we did this wave that, you could display all of these characters together, and you absolutely could. I've heard multiple people say that at first they weren't too excited for Jackal Ironbones, but after reading his story, they were like, oh, that's cool. I actually dig this character now. Knowing that they all get to go together, that I think is going to be a lot of fun. And that unknown bay at the end there, and that that ship sailing away, we're going to have to see where they're setting sail to. But that is for a future story. Because right now we are focused on the Horror of Einsamall. This pre-order, once again, it ends this Sunday. You have just a few more days. So far, this has been one of the most popular waves we have done, but we want more. So if you haven't purchased this wave yet, once again, it will be available from our retailers starting on Monday. But if you want to be amongst the first to get it, you want to get that, obviously all direct order ship before retailers do. And if you want to save as much as 30%, you're going to want to get over to Store Horseman before this Sunday, which is August 3rd, 11 p.m. Eastern time is when we close the pre-order on this. Get that pre-order in. Oh, man, that was a lot of talking. That was a lot. So I will be back here next week. I'm sure we'll have some cool stuff to talk about. We'll be on the other side. Fair warning, everybody. Stuff's going to get crazy. Like, the rest of this year is going to be intense. We're going to have a lot of things to talk about on coming Wednesday nights. I think Eric's going to be joining me quite a bit over the next few months. We'll leave you at that. We got a lot to reveal. We've got a lot of exciting things coming. First half of this year was amazing. Second half of the year is going to be even more amazing. Thank you all very much for tuning in tonight. Hope you enjoyed Storytime with Jeremy. I will see you next week.